you guys have a break, and then we will dive into T.S. Eliot, my truly beloved T.S. Eliot. How many of you feel like you kind of know T.S. Eliot's poetry? Okay, Neil, a little bit, a petit peu. Good. Yeah, for T.S. Eliot, we're going to spend 2 weeks, at least, and we're going to talk about Proof Rock, some of the shorter poems, The Wasteland, and four quartets.
I
So,
have recordings of a lot of that.
yeah, that's great. That's great. Yeah, he reads his own work beautifully, if dryly, you know.
Is he American?
Is he American? He was born in the States. He lived in the States through college, and then he moved to briefly um, France, briefly Germany, and mostly England. He lived in England for the rest of his life.
Yeah, I think of him as an English poet, but
Yeah, well, the
interesting.
English think of him as an English poet, and the Americans think of him as an American poet. So everybody gets to claim him, you know. Okay, so we're going to talk about Frost today. How's everybody doing? Good? Great. We're going to start with birches. Oh, Tony, I've got a new computer and can't what? You can't do screen sharing?
Can't hear a thing.
You can't hear.
Anything? Can everybody else hear me?
Yes.
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 Yeah.
Okay. Tony, can you screen share?
I don't think he can't hear you.
It's
Can you send him a chat? Send him
yeah,
a chat and see if he gets that.
yeah.
It's a setting.
He's working.
I'm going to start with birches and I will read it out loud and maybe Tony can get it set up. But here we go. Birches. When I see birches bend to left and right across the line of straighter, darker trees, I like to think some boy's been swinging them. But swinging doesn't bend them down to stay as ice storms do. Often you must have seen them loaded with ice a sunny winter morning after a rain. They click upon themselves as the breeze rises and turn many-colored as the stir cracks and crazes their enamel. Soon the sun's warmth makes them shed crystal shells, shattering and avalanching on the snow crust. Such heaps of broken glass to sweep away, you'd think the inner dome of heaven had fallen. They are dragged to withered bracken by the load, and they seem not to break. Though once they are bowed so low for long, they never right themselves. You may see their trunks arching in the woods years afterward, trailing their leaves on the ground like girls on hands and knees that throw their hair before them over their heads to dry in the sun. But I was going to say, when truth broke in with all her matter of fact about the ice storm, I should prefer to have some boy bend them as he went out and in to fetch the cows. Some boy too far from town to learn baseball, whose only play was what he found himself, summer or winter, and could play alone. One by one, he subdued his father's trees by riding them down over and over again until he took the stiffness out of them, and not one but hung limp. Not one was left for him to conquer. He learned all there was to learn about not launching out too soon, and so not carrying the tree away clear to the ground. He always kept his poise to the top branches, climbing carefully with the same pains you use to fill a cup up to the brim and even above the brim. Then he flung outward, feet first, with a swish, kicking his way down through the air to the ground. So was I once myself a swinger of birches, and so I dream of going back to be. It's when I'm weary of considerations and life is too much like a pathless wood where your face burns and tickles with the cobwebs broken across it, and one eye is weeping from a twig's having lashed across it open. I'd like to get away from Earth a while and then come back to it and begin over. May no fate willfully misunderstand me and half grant what I wish and snatch me away not to return. Earth, the right place for love. I don't know where it's likely to go better. I'd like to go by climbing a birch tree and climb black branches up a snow white trunk toward heaven till the tree could bear no more, but dipped its top and set me down again. That would be good both going and coming back. One could do worse than be a swinger of birches. I think this is such a great poem. Frost's little daughter. Oh, good. Screen sharing. Thank you. So go up a page. There we go. Okay. So Frost's little daughter at age 6 had a little journal entry or diary or something where she wrote about how she loved to swing birches. You know, she it was very cool. Her spelling was not so accurate, but she was really into doing that and said that she just really had a lot of fun doing that. Tony, it disappeared again. So this is really a poem. It's both about a real thing that you can do, you know, in nature with birch trees, apparently, but it's also very much a poem about the workings of the imagination. It's very much a poem that's taking pleasure in its own process of coming into being. Um, let's see if we can get this centered a little bit better. There we go. Okay. So birches. Um, it's a poem that keeps shifting its ground. You know, it's mostly written in a kind of loose iambic pentameter, but the line length varies a great deal. It's blank verse, but with a lot of variations. And Frost will often do that with a form. He'll take a received form, a form that comes down through the history of poetry in English, and he'll become very fluid with it. So it's there as a base, but it's constantly being sort of modulated and you know given a fluid form. Okay, so. I like to think some boy's been swinging them. Already the imagination enters into play. We see the birches bent down from ice storms, but already he likes to imagine that some kid, and he says later, a kid who lives by himself way out in the country, who can't learn to play baseball. And so this is what he does for fun. He rides the birches, you know, sort of his homemade pony, right? Frost says he likes to think some boy's been swinging them, but then he comes back to this description of the ice storm, which seems very realistic, very grounded in reality. Swinging doesn't bend them down to stay as ice storms do. Often, stop going down. Go back up. Okay, hold still.
Mhm.
Often you must have seen them loaded with ice a sunny winter morning after a rain. And then you get this incredibly beautiful description, which is actually echoing Shelley, the poet Shelley, in Adonais, his elegy for John Keats, where he writes, Life, like a dome of many-colored glass, stains the white radiance of eternity until death tramples it to fragments. So this beautiful description in Shelley's poem here, they click upon themselves as the breeze rises and turn many-colored as the stir cracks and crazes their enamel. Soon the sun's warmth makes them shed crystal shells, shattering and avalanching on the snow crust. Such heaps of broken glass to sweep away, you'd think the inner dome of heaven had fallen. You know, and you can see this echo from Shelley there with this description. They're dragged to the withered bracken by the load, and they seem not to break. Though once they're bowed so low for long, they never right themselves. And then you see this beautiful description of the branches trailing their leaves on the ground like girls on hands and knees that throw their hair before them over their heads to dry in the sun. So we've got the birches, we've got the ice storm, we've got the boys, we've got the girls, and this poem just keeps in a very crafted way, wandering its way along, finding new metaphors, new similes to describe this phenomenon that happens when the birches get bent, you know? And then you get this kind of wry commentary. But I was going to say when truth with a capital T broke in with all her matter of fact about the ice storm, and then we're back in the realm of fancy again. I should prefer to have some boy bend them. And we get this little story about the boy, which many critics say has a kind of sexual implication, riding the trees over and over and over until he subdues his father's trees, until he takes the stiffness out of them and they hang limp. Not one was left for him to conquer. And then you get this beautiful sort of set of lines about control, self-control, whether it's control sexually or control with regard to writing birches or control with regard to the artistic process. He learned all there was to learn about not launching out too soon. And so not carrying the tree away clear to the ground. He always kept his poise. We're talking very much about the creative process here, how to create something, how to keep it going um, until it finds its true form, until it finds its true shape. You're not rushing to the end. Keeps his poise to the top branches, climbing carefully with the same pains you use to fill a cup up to the brim and even above the brim. And then you fling outward, with a swish, kicking your way down through the air to the ground. And Frost, who is still being in this poem a swinger of birches, says, "So I once was myself a swinger of birches, and so I dream of going back to be." So there's a kind of delicious, gentle irony here. This poem that's finding its own way to the top of the tree and then flinging itself down, bending its way down, is talking about something that the poet is saying is lost in youth, is lost in the past. And then we get these moving lines about the difficulties of adult life. Now, when Frost wrote this poem, he didn't have much money at all. He had several small children. He was, becoming to really make a name of himself as a poet. But these were years of some struggle for the Frost family. And he's just talking about beautiful lines about the adult aches and pains of responsible behavior. It's when I'm weary of considerations and life is too much like a pathless wood. Beautiful simile about, you know, being in the middle of a thick woods where your face is getting full of cobwebs and a twig scrapes across your eye. I'd like to get away from Earth a while, just a while. And this is like after apple picking, the long two-pointed ladder poking through a tree toward heaven still. I'd like to get away from Earth a while and then come back to it and begin over. They know fate willfully misunderstand me and half grant what I wish and snatch me away, not to return. Amazing lines. Earth, the right place for love. I don't know where it's likely to go better. I'd like to go by climbing a birch tree and climb black branches of a snow white trunk toward heaven, till the tree could bear no more, but dipped its top and set me down. That would be good both going and coming back. One could do better than be a swinger of birches. So I guess what I'm hoping to get across is the way this poem keeps traveling toward its end. It keeps, in a sense, climbing a birch and then swinging down and then climbing another birch and swinging down. First of all, the lines about the boy, and then the lines about the ice storm echoing Shelley, these beautiful lines. And then the lines about the girl flinging her hair over her head to dry in the sun. And then back to the story about the boy. And then these very mature, reflective lines about the difficulties of adult life, the simile about the weeping eye and the cobwebs in the face. And then this, as so often with Frost, this meaningful equivocation. I'd like to climb, but come down. I'd like to get away, but come back. Whatever fate there is, don't misunderstand me. I don't want to leave for good. This is not suicide. I want to just get out for a while and then return. And then he, sort of ends the poem when it's ready to end. It's really thought its way through to the end with, you know, that would be good both going and coming back. Get away and come back. One could do worse than be a swinger of birches. So would anybody like to comment or add to this poem?
Well, one thing I could say is it's not just suicide that he's rejecting, it's transfiguration. He doesn't want to be lifted to a transcendent plane for good because he likes living on Earth.
True. Yeah, Douglas?
Yeah, since I'm surrounded with woods and there's a lot of birches and they're almost all bent, it's really unusual to have a large, straight up birch tree unless it's growing in the midst of the woods. But I think the critique of it as sexual imagery says more about the critics than it does about the poem.
I kind of do too, but they're fond of it. Yeah.
And we have, we usually have at least one ice storm a year, and it's always amazing when the ice starts coming off the trees, and it can make quite a lot of noise. Besides being just absolutely amazing when the sun rises through the ice-coated trees.
Yeah. Yeah.
31 years ago in February, we had a big ice storm here, and people would not believe us that it was a big ice storm in Mississippi, but it was very heavy rain followed by like sleet, and it all turned to ice, and everything was breaking. Caleb and Ann
Yeah.
and I walked through the town, and people said everywhere you walk, tree branches would fall after you got past there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, in 2005, I think it was, we had a pretty bad ice storm here, and it sounded like gunfire in the woods
Yeah.
all night long, just, trees snapping. And there are areas now where you can see where all the treetops are still, they're broken off, the truncated trees from that ice storm.
Yeah. Any other comments on this poem? Well, let's move on then. Okay. And you guys, you're always very welcome to have requests. Like can we talk about so and so, or I really like so and so, just whatever. I really like that kind of input. We're going to zoom ahead and talk about Nothing Gold Can Stay, which is to me a perfect tiny gem of a poem. And this is, a bit farther along. It's so short, I'll just read it to you. Well, let's see. It's going to be down farther.
Soon.
Yeah, soon. There we go. There we go. And then we're going to go backwards after this. Okay. Nothing gold can stay. Oh, yeah, this is too far ahead, but we're going to do it anyway. Nature's first green is gold, her hardest hue to hold. Her early leaves a flower, but only so an hour. Then leaf subsides to leaf, so Eden sank to grief. So dawn goes down to day. Nothing gold can stay. Perfect little poem rhyming A, B, B, C, C, D, D with 6 syllables in each line, 8-line poem. And in The Brothers Karamazov, Ivan talks about loving the sticky buds of spring. He says, that's one thing he truly loves is the sticky buds of spring. And in this poem, we realize that when leaves first come to a tree, they're yellow, they're not green yet. So nature's first green is gold. It sounds like a paradox. It sounds like, like when I would teach this poem, my students would be like, huh? What's this? But Frost is seeing so accurately here. Nature's first green is gold, her hardest hue to hold. Her early leaves a flower, but only so an hour. And then you get this great word, then leaf subsides to leaf. It goes down, it loses strength, it loses energy, then leaf subsides to leaf. So Eden sank to grief. So dawn goes down to day. And again, great word choices, goes down to day. How could dawn go down as if descending into day? This delicate first goldenness, this delicate first flower. And then, the last line repeating the title, Nothing Gold Can Stay. A mournful poem, but so delicately beautiful that I think the beauty of it cuts against the mournfulness of it. I think it's just one of the absolutely perfect poems.
Hmm.
Ryan,
I was wondering if the title at the very top spoils the poem a little bit for a first-time reader.
what do you think?
I think it does. I think it's sort of giving the plot away. And I think the last line is a bit of a surprise, or it's the moral, but if you have it in your mind already, then maybe it's a guide to puzzling out all the different pieces of the poem. But it struck me that the title didn't I didn't want to see it there. I wanted to be surprised by the end.
Right. Be surprised.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see that. I guess for me, it works like kind of a perfect little package. Do you know what I mean? Like this shape of a poem that it starts with the title and then it makes a little circle and comes back to the title. But I can definitely see how at the same time, um, having the title from the very beginning sort of tells us where we're going to get, you know? Yeah, it can be. I found it's very dangerous to give a poem a title based on a line that occurs later in the poem because it can spoil that sense of arriving at something, you know? What do others of you feel?
I was thinking it's interesting because, in at least in the English poetry tradition, you have a lot of carpe diem poems, but
Mhm.
this isn't that. It doesn't say anything about since this is going to happen, while ye may go marry or anything like that. It's just this is the way it is. And sort of with the Eden thing, and sort of we brought this on ourselves.
Yeah, yeah. It's just the nature of time. And I think it's so brilliant that it does not turn and directly talk about human affairs, except by mentioning Eden, of course. But, it's such a perceptive and accurate noticing of something that happens with leaves and with dawn, that delicacy fades to something more robust, but also less miraculous in a way, you know? Yeah. Okay,
At a literal level, about yellow coming first, gold coming first, and then turning into green. I realize I hadn't thought about that very much. I'm so aware of yellow as a fall color. And right now, uh, around me in Boulder, Colorado, um, everything is just so yellow. Um, Almost all the trees. And my um, mountain ash in my front yard always gets its redness in October. First, there's the green turns to yellow, and then splotches of bright red appear that just I love so much. And it's been a struggle for them this year because it's been so windy and wet.
Mm,
It's rained practically every day. It's chilly and the wind blows fiercely. My property is pretty much covered in an inch of yellow leaves. Um, and I keep thinking that the redness isn't ever going to really have time to mature this year, but it makes me want to pay more attention in the spring when the leaves first come out.
yeah, yeah. Let's zoom up a little and look
And
at,
I have a question.
yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I'm wondering, is there any did this, it's almost like nothing gold can stay is like an aphorism that I'm wondering whether that phrase had ever existed before this poem and that he was really trying to elaborate on that aphorism.
I don't think it did.
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, he's a brilliant aphoristic poet too, you know? I'll tell
Okay.
you a little one that I didn't include. The old dog barks backward without getting up. I can remember when he was a pup. Isn't it great? Let's zoom up and look at For Once Then Something. I'm having this weird thing happen with all these different. Well, I don't want to get out of that. Okay, For Once Then Something. Others taunt me with having knelt at well curbs, always wrong to the light. So never seeing deeper down in the well than where the water gives me back in a shining surface picture, me, myself, in the summer heaven, godlike, looking out of a wreath of fern and cloud puffs. Once, when trying with chin against a well curb, I discerned, as I thought, beyond the picture, through the picture, a something white, uncertain, something more of the depths. And then I lost it. Water came to rebuke the too clear water. One drop fell from a fern, and lo, a ripple shook whatever it was lay there at bottom, blurred it, blotted it out. What was that whiteness? Truth, a pebble of quartz. For once, then, something. So, just a brief comment on the form of this poem. Peter mentioned this last week. This is written in hen decasyllabics, which is like practically impossible to pull off. It's really incredibly different. And that's an 11 syllable line with this rhythm. Da 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 da. Others taught me with having knelt at well curbs, always wrong to the light, so never seeing. You can hear that, right? Um, so it's not a poem that rhymes, but it has its own particular form that comes down from classical poetry. Otis, you're raising your hand?
I'm wondering about the italics for the word once right in the middle. Only that word.
We're gonna get there.
Oh, we're gonna get there. Okay.
Yeah, we're gonna get there. Yeah. Good call. Good call. Okay. So this is a narrative poem. It's also a philosophical poem. It's a poem about desiring to find truth. So I thought of Tony when I was reading this over this morning. But it's a poem about desiring to find truth by telling a story. So who these others are is not specified, just others. Taunt me with having knelt at well curbs, always wrong to the light. This is in the realm of pure fancy. You don't really imagine that this grown man was kneeling at a well curb, staring down into the water, with others standing around him saying, "No, no, you're doing it wrong." You know,
You never know.
you never know, Peter says, but I know. Okay. So he's trying to see beyond his own image, which is so brilliant. It's like that's what we all do is desire to see beyond our own image, but we keep seeing our own image. We keep seeing ourselves reflected back to ourselves, right? Always wrong to the light. So never seeing deeper down in the well than where the water gives me back in a shining surface picture, me, myself, in the summer heaven, godlike, looking out of a wreath of fern and cloud puffs. So you get this brilliant image of this man staring down into the water of a well, as he says, trying to see something that's not himself, not his own image. But all that does is reflect himself back even more nobly. Me, myself, godlike, looking out of a wreath of fern and cloud puffs, which is funny, but also frustrating and also very self-knowledgeable, right? You know? So this kind of frustration, how can we see beyond what we see being ourselves. Yeah, Leslie?
It also seems a little bit like Narcissus. He's sitting there wreathed in this thing like he's made himself into a little icon of a god.
Absolutely. But he's trying not to be Narcissus, you know? At least that's the story. It's like he's trying to see something besides his own self-image. But all he keeps getting back is his own. Therefore, that's why once is italicized. Once is kind of a heartbreaking word here because it's like once something
Only
happened.
once.
Huh?
Only
Only
once.
once.
Yeah.
Only once. Only once. Yeah, Douglas?
Yeah, I can definitely see him doing that and having people saying, "Rub it, you see nothing that way."
That's really funny. Yeah, absolutely. And this is very much self-knowledgeable about being a poet too. It's like you're trying to create something that reflects the world back, but you keep also reflecting yourself back. So once, when trying with chin against a well curve, I discerned as I thought beyond the picture, through the picture, of something white, uncertain, something more of the depths. So white, this color of absolute purity, but it's uncertain. Something more of the depths, not just the depths of the water, but the depths of being itself. And then I lost it. And then you get this beautiful biblical word. Water came to rebuke the too clear water, as if the too clear water is offering a gift that's not supposed to be offered. One drop fell from a fern, and lo, a ripple shook whatever it was lay there at bottom. So this vision, is it a vision? This uncertainty is lost, blurred it, blotted it out. What was that whiteness? Truth? A pebble of quartz? For once, then, something. This poem breaks my heart. So beautiful. And it's so full of poignancy, but told in a kind of firmly controlled, um, semi-humorous, rueful way, you know? And also in this incredibly difficult form, um, not the length of a sonnet, but more or less the length of a sonnet, not the meter of a sonnet, more or less the meter of a sonnet, but a form that's even more difficult than a sonnet. So here's our philosophical poem. Douglas, you were wanting to say something a moment ago? No? Okay.
Can I say something? I'll pipe
Absolutely.
in. Um, I love this poem. And I don't see it, well, yeah, it's poignant, but I don't see it quite as sad because, um, for once something. So maybe there'll be another time. You don't know. And I also just think because like nothing gold can stay, he does repeat the line and he repeats the word once. And once kind of implies twice in a funny way. And I also, maybe it's just because we read them together. I think these two poems are like companions because they both have the line in the title, and Nothing Gold Can Stay is such a brief and perfect description of something gold that it has stayed in 2026 of October. Oh, that poem has stayed. He created something lovely and golden and lasting.
Oh, that's nice.
So, so this one, it gives me hope, yeah, well, kind of, sort of, we're all looking for truth. And there's all kinds of places to look. Why not in a leaf of gold or down a well? And to me, the word once just, yeah, implies its opposite.
That's very sweet. You have a more cheerful disposition than I do.
Just today, you could ask my husband.
Yeah.
It's not typical.
No,
Uh,
I think that's a really nice reading. Yeah, Peter.
I agree with that. I think it's a cheerful skeptic's poem. And
Yeah,
I think Anne is less of a skeptic maybe than we are. It's like there may be something out there of untold value, but all you ever get is a glimpse of it.
Yeah.
And I think for this one, there is an aphorism in the back of it. I don't know how old it is, but I think very old. Truth is at the bottom of a well.
True, true, true. And you can't see to the bottom of the well except
Yeah,
very briefly every once in a great while. Yeah. I don't know why. I mean, I don't mean sad in a way that's sad. It just it hurts my heart. This poem hurts,
yeah, yeah.
you know.
Well, but he doesn't give up. We don't come to the end and say, well, I'm not looking in the well again.
I
that's
know.
true.
I know. It's true. It's true.
Yeah.
It's let's go backward a little bit. Let's go up backward and see where we get. Oh, okay. Let's look at the need of being versed in country things, which does have a pun. The need of being versed in country things. The house had gone to bring again to the midnight sky a sunset glow. Now the chimney was all of the house that stood like a pistol after the petals go. The barn opposed across the way that would have joined the house in flame had it been the will of the wind, was left to bear forsaken the place's name. No more it opened with all one end for teams that came by the stony road to drum on the floor with scurrying hoofs and brush the mow with the summer load. The birds that came to it through the air at broken windows flew out and in, their murmur more like the sigh we sigh from too much dwelling on what has been.
Mm.
Yet for them the lilac renewed its leaves, and the aged elm, though touched with fire, and the dry pump flung up an awkward arm, and the fence post carried a strand of wire. For them there was really nothing sad, but though they rejoiced in the nest they kept, one had to be versed in country things not to believe the Phoebes wept. There again, a title that is repeated later, the need of being versed in country things, you know. I want to say this about Frost. Um, okay, yeah, Douglas.
Yeah, one of the things I was just going to read back through is the Phoebes generally nest under the eaves of the house. So when the house was gone, the Phoebes had no place to nest.
But they found something.
Yeah, but that would not have been their preferred spot.
Okay, house number two, Barry.
Well, having lost my home in the Altadena fire, this poem really brought that back in a
Yeah,
strong way for me. And the feeling of walking around the lot of where my home had been and seeing that, the chimney that survived and a few trees that survived. I mean, it just brought me right back to that experience.
I bet it did. I bet it did. Yeah. And you think about all the houses, you know, in places like New England or rural Mississippi, the houses that, I mean, you still see chimneys standing and you still see lilac trees that were planted when somebody first built the house, you know, but the house itself is gone. Um, I want to say this about Frost. I want to talk about this for a minute. Frost is a really great eco poet. And for a long time, he wasn't really read that way. You know, for instance, a number of critics sort of said, oh, Frost is an escapist. He just wants to write about rural things and not face the realities of 20th century life in America. That's a bunch of bull hog. Um, Frost is a great writer about nature, and he's also a great writer about the nature of the relationship or the very complicated natures of the relationships between the human and the other than human. One of the primary necessities for eco-poetry is that you view the other than human as equally real, equally significant, equally sufficient unto itself as the human realm, not just as a backdrop for human concerns and human affairs. And this is a huge kind of different perspective and point of view, you know? So what Frost is thinking about here, what is partly the human poignancy, the sense of loss, the sense of sadness that we can feel seeing the chimney, seeing the lilac, seeing the barn, but knowing that the house is gone, knowing that the people are gone, knowing that the barn will never open with all one end for teams that come by the stony road to drum on the floor, knowing that all of that is gone, but the birds remain. The birds might, their murmur more like the sigh we sigh for too much dwelling on what has been. So if, as Douglas said, they lost their primary home, still, yet for them, the lilac renewed its leaf, and the aged elm, though touched with fire. For them, there's not this sense of loss because they don't experience time the way humans do. They experience something that we can't really imagine, which is the pure being of just being. For them, there was really nothing sad. But though they rejoiced in the nest they kept, now this pun, this ancient, Shakespearean pun about sex country things, one had to be versed in country things. One had to be versed in also the kind of stoicism, the hardness, the matter of factness that's developed if one lives in the country, if one learns to live in the country, not to believe the Phoebes wept.
Well, they're nesting in the barn now, so they haven't really lost, they have a reasonably good home in under the eaves of the barn.
Yeah, yeah. But still, it's hard for us not to imagine that the birds are sad the way we're sad. But Frost corrects that. He says, no, that's not the case. Beautiful line. Yet for them, the lilac renewed its leaf. Time goes on, nature goes on. The leaves come to the lilac, and the aged elm renews its leaves as well, right? And the dry pump is still there. The fence post is still there. Things are still there. Nature is still there. Even though the house has been gone, even though everything the house signifies as far as human dwelling and family is no longer there.
This brings to mind too that when we first went to the site after our house had burned down, we had two large cedar trees in the front yard that were probably there when the house was built. They were incredible, actually, and both of them survived the fire. And as we kind of sat there, just almost in shock at having lost not only the house but everything, all our worldly possessions, those trees, the fact that they survived, it was extremely comforting. I mean, we just wanted to sit under those trees and cherish them because that was all that was left, really. So I think I can relate to that notion of there's loss, but then nature abides somehow.
Yeah. God, that must have been such an experience.
It was
Wow.
surreal and really difficult to even comprehend.
Yeah. I think I mentioned John Fisher, my first husband. He and his wife lived in Pacific Palisades, and their house wasn't burned, but everything around them was. And they're only now able to start moving back in. So it's been a rough go. Yeah, Brian.
I had I was struck in the third stanza by the word scurrying to describe the sounds that horses' hooves make on the floor of a barn. I wouldn't have thought of that word at all because that strikes me as being what scurrying animals like mice
I
make
know.
those sounds. So I'm not sure where that comes from. It seemed to me out of place.
And it goes oddly with drum, to drum and scurry at the same time.
Yeah, the drumming is very apt.
Yeah, yeah.
Now,
Scurrying hooves.
I'm
Yeah.
not a person who's heard lots of horses in barns, but I didn't understand that.
Anybody who has more experience with horses in barns have a comment about that? Looking at you, Douglas. Deborah, you're mute.
I don't I have to read back to get the context, but horses are terrified of fires. And if ever a horse would be scurrying, it might be one that was tied up in a barn and trying to escape a fire. I don't know.
Yeah, but this is just describing the horses bringing the hay in.
Yeah, I know. So
Before the
that
fire, yeah.
maybe that doesn't work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I grew up with horses and barns, and it feels fine to me because horses don't just step. They are always shuffling and dragging their hooves across the ground as well as stomping or stepping on it. So the scurrying in the sense of uh, being more of a scraping sound, more of a gentle movement,
Maybe.
still feels right to me.
Okay. Good comment. Thank you. I have zero experience with horses and barns. In fact, I have zero experience with horses really, because the one time I went horseback riding, I couldn't make the horse leave the barn. It was very embarrassing. It's like, come on, all right. This is so embarrassing. Anyway, so we have a few more poems. Would somebody like to suggest one that you would like to talk about?
I don't have one to suggest, but I wanted to circle back to Mending Wall for a moment because there were some postings from Neil and Otis about after our session about that I thought were interesting and raised some questions about what Frost's attitude was toward walls and fences. And I was I know I think it was I don't think it might have been Neil who was kind of saying, well, he was really, I mean, fences really have a good useful purpose and that there was, but it seemed to me that Frost was ambivalent about fences and walls. So I wondered what you thought vis-a-vis those comments.
I think Frost is ambivalent about practically everything. I just think Frost is a poet who is characterized by ambivalence, and or equivocation, the ability to see both sides of something. Yeah, they made really good points. One, that apple trees would never grow near pine trees because the pine trees acidify the soil, so you don't need a wall there. But two, that building the wall or repairing the wall is an act of neighborliness. It's a way of having some kind of contact. And yet, the other guy is not so interested in that. He's not saying, oh, come on over and have some tears. And so it's like it cuts both ways, I think. It's like the person speaking the poem is the one who issues the invitation, it's time to mend the wall. And yet he's also the one who says, we don't need a wall. The person who's
Right.
on the other side saying good fences make good neighbors is not really interested in being a good neighbor in any particular outgoing sense. So you've got this kind of, as I say, ambivalence or equivocation. It's like it's a kind of both and situation. Brian.
Um, the neighbor mentions the father. It struck me that this is not the first generation in which this mending happens. That
Yeah,
there's a you look back into the past and the grandfathers have done this.
yeah,
They're continuing a ritual and a tradition that's really valuable.
yeah,
Right.
absolutely, absolutely. And continuing an argument that's really valuable, because it makes us think, right? It's like, is it true that good fences make good neighbors, or is it true that something there is that doesn't love a wall? Well, they're kind of both true.
I also thought about the expression mending fences, which I assume maybe pre-existed this poem, which really means repairing a damaged friendship. You're mending
Yeah,
fences because something has rent a friendship that existed before. This is more a case of nature having, or maybe the hunters having, broken down the wall, and this ritual kind of, well, we have to rebuild it because it was there before, and we need to just sort of continue that tradition. But that tradition leaves the two neighbors on opposite sides of the wall, and doesn't really bring them together particularly. So I think I like the idea that Frost isn't really sure. I mean, that fences can cut both ways. They can be useful, but they also hold things apart. And I go back to that line about, you know, before building a fence, I would want to know what I'm fencing in and what I'm fencing out. Um, so but I thought the comments were really interesting and illuminating.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. One thing I love about Frost is that there's so much there if you just start looking for it, you know? It's like his poems are really accessible. And yet they also repay reading and rereading and rereading and going slowly with. Let's kind of zoom back through going up and see what we come to as we move upward. Putting in the seed. Putting in the seed. So beautiful. Let's finish with this one. Putting in the seed. You come to fetch me from my work tonight when supper's on the table, and we'll see if I can leave off burying the white, soft petals fallen from the apple tree. Soft petals, yes, but not so barren quite, mingled with these, smooth bean and wrinkled pea. And go along with you ere you lose sight of what you came for and become like me, slave to a springtime passion for the earth. How love burns through the putting in the seed, on through the watching for that early birth, when just as the soil tarnishes with weed, the sturdy seedling with arched body comes, shouldering its way and shedding the earth crumbs.
Wow.
So this is a marriage poem. It's a sonnet. It's an Italian sonnet, a Petrarchan sonnet. It rhymes tonight, see, white tree, A B A B, white pea, sight me, A B A B, earth, seed, birth, weed, comes, crumbs, D C D E E. So it breaks, but it breaks interestingly. Most sonnets break um, 8 and then 6. This one breaks 9 and then 5. And yet the rhyme scheme, the rhyme scheme is an 8-6 rhyme scheme. But the sense of it, where the period comes after earth, is after 9 lines. And then we have this capitalized line here, how love burns through the putting in the seed, as if he's really calling our attention to that. He's really calling our attention to that. But it starts out as just a domestic moment. You come to fetch me. I'm out in the fields planting. You come to tell me, come on, dinner's ready. And we'll see if I can leave off burying the white soft petals fallen from the apple tree again. But not just burying the apple petals, he's actually planting beans and peas. But because the petals have fallen from the tree, when he's digging the soil, the white petals, which of course will help fertilize the soil, get buried along with the beans and the peas. So we'll see if I can stop. I love doing this so much. We'll see if I can stop and go along with you before you lose sight of what you came for and become like me, slave to a springtime passion for the earth. So we've got this thing, it's like a Mobius strip, it's flipping around there. First of all, you come to get me. We'll see if I can make myself leave before you join me equally impassioned for the earth. And then you get these beautiful lines, how love burns through the putting in the seed, which obviously is sexual. And it's also agricultural. On through the watching for that early birth, describing the way seeds, dicotyledons first arch up through the ground with that little kind of shoulder action, like a little knuckle pushing up through the ground. And then they straighten out, and then there's the leaves, you know? When just as the soil tarnishes with weed, the sturdy seedling with arched body comes, shouldering its way. Those of you who've watched a baby get born, notice when the shoulder pushes out, first the head and then the shoulder, it's got to shoulder its way first, unless it's breach or something, shedding the earth crumbs, you know. So this absolutely gorgeous poem about planting, about fertility, about labor again, you know, work is the sweetest, or love, what is it? Something is the sweetest dream that labor knows.
Work is the
Work
sweetest.
is the sweetest dream that labor knows, the work of planting, the work of sowing, uh, sex, pregnancy, birth, the creation of life again and again and again, you know? And then again, this incredibly brilliant sonnet. It's like Frost is the 20th century poet I can think of who is most at home with the widest range of received forms. It's just uncanny. And he knew that about himself. He knew that he was a master of meter, but he talks about himself. He says the poem is about the shape of the sentence, not just about the meter. So the sentence playing off against the line, the sentence itself has to be poetic and natural at the same time. Yeah, Barry?
Question. So the poems that we started with Frost, that the long ones that involved a lot of dialogue between people, and then the late ones we've been talking about the last couple weeks have all been absent of that same kind of narrative dialogue kind of thing. Was that something he did early in his writing and then departed from, or did he come back? And how did that work in
No,
time?
he did it all through. It's just that I wanted to group them together so that we could talk about them together. But no, he's got a ton of long narrative poems and dialogue poems all the way through.
Okay.
But I think you could say that most of the greatest narrative and dialogue poems are in north of Boston or soon after, like Two Witches is from New Hampshire.
Yeah.
And that later on, the long dialogue or narrative poems lose something of their immediacy or urgency, though they're still good. The longest one is called Snow, about a man that you think might get lost forever in a blizzard, but he comes through all right. But it's a very relaxed poem. It's a good poem, but it does not have the kind of drama you would think it would have.
Yeah. Yeah, he gets real talky. He gets real prolix. Aha, building fences, Douglas. Okay. Okay. Pile those boulders. Okay. Yeah, thank you, everybody. Any more quick comments or questions?
So
Okay.
we're off next week, and
Yeah, but Thursday we'll talk about Frost for the last time.
oh, okay.
Okay. So,
Thanks, Ann. It's
so
really illuminating and helpful.
Barry, where are you living now?
I'm in, my son and I are living in a small ADU house in Orange, California, about 5 minutes away from my girlfriend and my daughter and my son-in-law and my grandson. So we have family close by and we're comfortable in this little place. Big change from our 4,000 square foot home that burned down, but we're doing okay.
Are you going to rebuild?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
No.
That's downsizing with a vengeance.
Yeah, yeah. We had planned on downsizing anyway, but we were hoping to do it a little more gradually
Yeah. Yeah.
and without losing all of our possessions in the process.
Barry, how long ago was the fire?
It was in January, I think, or
Yeah,
yeah,
January
yeah,
January 6th, 7th, 8th, something like
yeah,
that.
that's right.
7th.
Yeah, yeah.
7th. Yeah.
Gary,
So
it's good that you forgot the date.
Yeah. Absolutely.
well, I have to say the great blessing in this whole thing for my son and I is being close to our family. I mean, we were kind of the lone holdouts living up in the Pasadena area. All of the extended family was down here in Orange County, where I had lived in Orange County earlier in my life, gone to high school down here, did not want to live in Orange County,
Yeah.
and the family kept pulling. The gravitational pull was present, but it took the fire to really get us to move. And so now that we're here, I think we're where we need to be. So we plan
Right.
on staying.
Right. Well, everybody have a good couple of days and I'll see you on Thursday. And
Thank you.
for sure, one poem we're going to talk about is Directive, which is the last truly great poem that Frost wrote.
Well, there was an attachment that you sent at some point that people said they didn't get, and I didn't get either. So I don't know if that poem is in
Okay, I'll check it out.
this.
I'll send everything again.
Okay,
Just
okay,
keep
good.
watching. Okay.